This is the new Dacia Jogger, and it's currently the cheapest seven-seater car on sale. And if you were to peel back this ruggedized exterior, would you believe it? It's actually based on the Dacia Sandero supermini. And with prices starting at £15,000, this thing seems to sit in a class of one. But can you really buy a proper decent seven-seater car for less than 20 grand? Well, today I'm going to do my best to find out. But before we go any further, if you like what we do, why not give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. Now, the only real carryover from the Sandero in terms of design is parts of the front end. These headlights right here are the same Y-shaped design that you get on the Sandero, and they're LEDs as standard. The grille is also roughly the same outline as what you get on the Sandero, but it now features these little metal strips in the centre that shows just how rugged and lifestyle ready the Jogger is. Of course, there's a lot of plastic cladding to go along with it as well to give it that more SUV-like look. 16-inch rims are standard throughout the range. The entry-level Essential gets hubcaps. On the Comfort, you get something called flex wheels, which are essentially a mix between a hubcap and an alloy, and they're apparently cheaper to replace. And then on top spec Extreme SE models, you get a proper alloy wheel, and they also come painted in black, just like we have here. And of course, the silhouette of the Jogger is pretty unique as well, because it mixes in elements of an SUV, an estate, and also an MPV, particularly with the roofline continuing at the same height throughout, opening up enough space for 2 extra seats in the back for that 7-seat configuration. Now, although it's based on the Sandero, Dacia has actually managed to stretch the car out, so it's quite a bit longer than a Sandero at 4.5 meters. But the important thing is actually wheelbase, because that affects interior space. It clocks in at 2.9 meters on the Jogger, which is really important because that should, again, open up even more room for those inside. The back of the Jogger is wider than it is on the Sandero, and not only has that been done to improve its road presence and make it look more aggressive, but it also allows for a larger boot opening. And so when we open it up, you get 700 litres of storage in the back. However, there's a few different configurations, bearing in mind that all cars come with 7 seats. So you'll get 700 litres if you take the rear 2 seats out. However, we've got them in at the moment, and you can fold them flat, which still leaves you with a really big boot, particularly as we've got a very high roofline. Even if you put the 2 rear seats back in place, you still get well over 200 litres, which isn't massive, but it's a fair bit bigger than you get on a lot of other 7-seater cars. The Jogger's interior has been lifted pretty much straight out of the Sandero, and that's by no means a bad thing. It's very easy to access everything you need, but it's very much a case of function over form. We do get a nice bit of cloth finish on top of the dashboard, which does make it feel a little bit more homely. These cloth seats, while extremely basic, are actually pretty damn comfortable. And being a basic car, the aircon is all controlled through physical dials, which I actually prefer over touch systems. And the good news is that all Joggers come with air conditioning included as standard. The wheel is pretty ugly and obviously isn't made of the nicest material, but it does a good job of steering the car, and you've also got controls on there to flick through different menus on the very small TFT display. Now, the interior layout is pretty much standard across all Joggers, but the big difference actually comes with the tech that comes included. Now, this is an absolute top spec car, so we get an 8-inch infotainment system with a few touch shortcut buttons on the left-hand side. Now, it's a really basic system, but that's kind of what you'd expect on quite a basic car. And on the top spec car, it comes with nav included as well as wireless phone integration. If you go for the mid-spec Comfort, you lose wireless phone integration, but you can still access Apple CarPlay and Android Auto through a USB cable with a USB port right up here on the dashboard. And you also lose the nav app, but if you're plugging your smartphone in, you're probably going to use Google Maps or Waze anyway. But the entry-level car, the Essential, is where it gets really interesting, because it scraps this unit altogether and instead replaces it with a little cubby of where you can put your smartphone. And you can actually download a Dacia app that will kind of take over your phone and work as like its own little infotainment system. And on that, we need to talk about pricing. So it all starts off at $14,995 for the Essential. And above that is the Comfort at 16,595, and that adds in the 8-inch touchscreen as well as keyless start. The top spec is the Extreme SE, which comes in at 17,395. And with that, you get the nav on your infotainment system, you get the wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, as well as 16-inch alloy wheels. Now, whatever way you cut it, this is an extremely cheap car. Now, personally, I would probably go for the Comfort because it balances all the essential gear that you need and adds in a few luxuries. But seriously, whichever one you go for, you're not really going to be losing out because the overall quality and key feature list is pretty level across the range. Headroom in the middle row of the Jogger is really spacious. If I sit upright, there's still plenty more space to still go. So if you're 6 foot and over and you sit up straight, you should be fine for headroom. Knee room is a little bit tighter. I've got the driver's seat in my position and there's not a huge amount of play left, but you do sit very upright in the Jogger. So I would think even if you are taller than I am and I'm just a bit below 6 foot, you should still be all right if you're sitting in the middle row of the Jogger. And what's great is that you've got a picnic tray in the back. And yes, it's a little bit fiddly. You have to move your legs out the way, but still you can sit down and have your lunch while staring out to the sea or forest or wherever you want to take your Jogger that's rural and adventure-y. Other than that, naturally, not a lot of luxuries in the back of the car, but then again, it does cost around 15 grand. We do, however, have a little 12-volt charger, so you can whack an adapter in there and charge up things like your phone or your iPad. While legroom is a little bit tight on the middle row, on the third row, it does mean that you open up just a little bit more space. So it does mean that it's possible to put adults in the back, although I would still recommend against it. Knee room isn't too bad, but it would be a little bit tight if you were 6 foot and over. But headroom is amazing. If I sit up straight, I've still got loads of space to go. This feels considerably more spacious and roomy than a lot of 7-seat SUVs that I've been in that can cost 15, 20 or even £30,000 more. And getting in the back is pretty simple as well. There's no fiddly seat mechanism. You literally just pull a tag, push the seat forward, and you can get to the back. Now we're on the road, we can talk about the engine lineup. And it's really simple because there's only one to choose from. And it's a 1 litre, 3-cylinder turbo engine producing 110 horsepower. And that's all accessed through a 6-speed manual gearbox. At the moment, there currently isn't an automatic available. However, in 2023, the company is going to launch a hybrid version. Now, it won't be a plug-in hybrid, so you won't be able to plug it in, top it up and do long distances on electric power alone. But Dacia claims that it'll be able to cover around 80% of the distance on electric power when going around urban areas, and that will come with an auto. There will also be an LPG version, but Dacia tells me that you won't be able to get that in the UK. It'll be available in other markets where LPG is more popular, but here it's quite a niche market and they're not going to sell it. So again, we're just in the regular 110 non-hybrid version here, and it's not too bad. So 3-cylinder engines are known for being a little bit gruff, and it's quite hard to make them feel refined, particularly compared to something like a 4-cylinder engine. And in the Dacia, most of the time, it feels pretty damn smooth. Again, cruising around between 4th and 5th gear at the moment, and it feels responsive, there's enough torque there, and I feel like I'm not wanting for power very often. 0 to 60 comes around in 11 seconds, which isn't the fastest thing in the world, but the 0 to 30 time feels pretty fast. Now, we don't have an official figure for it, and I can't measure it, unfortunately, but it does feel relatively nippy. My only gripe is that at low speeds and when you're sat still, it can feel a little bit unrefined. You could just get some vibrations and thudding coming through the cockpit that you wouldn't get on a normal 4-cylinder car, or even some of the absolute top 3-cylinder engines that you get in German manufacturers. I've also noticed that when it's idling, it can feel a little bit on the rough side as well. But there's always going to be a caveat to every point that I make with this car is it's dead cheap. It's much cheaper than all of the competition. So is that really a big problem? I don't think a slight bit of vibration from the engine really is a deal breaker here. This thing weighs 1,200 kilograms, which is ridiculous considering how large it is. But it's basically not only just a lightweight platform, but because there's not loads of tech on board to weigh it down, it's a really simple car and therefore isn't clogged up with weight. And that means that when you're going through corners, it doesn't wallow from side to side. You know, we've got 20 centimetres of ground clearance in the Dacia Jogger, which can mean that with a relatively high centre of gravity, you could flop around all over the place. And I'm really not experiencing it here. It just feels like a regular, normal car to drive. If anything, the driving experience is very similar to the regular Sandero. And if you want to watch my review of the Sandero, just click the link in the top right-hand corner. Now, we don't expect cars like this to drive like performance cars and be brimming with feel, but it doesn't always feel like when I turn the wheel, the front wheels are changing direction in proportion to my inputs on the steering wheel. Again, it's just a really small gripe. If you buy this car, you're probably not going to really care about it, but if steering's your thing, you might find that this is just going to feel a little bit strange at times. And aside from the slightly chuggy engine, refinement is really good. You might notice a little bit of clattering coming from my microphone, and not only is that my voice, but it's also the camera that we've got in the back. But other than that, no vibrations really of note in the cabin. It's really quite quiet in here as well. It's just a nice place to be. When you take into consideration the increased ride height, the option to have 7 seats that can comfortably fit 7 people, plus smartphone integration, I kind of think it might be the most complete car that Dacia makes. Either way, it represents fantastic value for money, and I think Dacia is onto a real winner with the new Jogger.